All right. So welcome. This is Calculating Embodied Carbon, Integrated Tools and Calculators for AEC Professionals, brought to you by the Carbon Leadership Forum Hub of Wisconsin. So thank you for being here. I'm Ben Austin. I'm the Sustainability Lead at Findorf. Um, and just to set the table, again, it looks like from the attendees I see embodied carbon is not a new subject to any of you. But ultimately, embodied carbon is all of the greenhouse gas emissions associated with the various stages of creating, installing, disposing, or reusing our building materials. And regardless of the specific metric, I know this pie chart can look a little different depending on what source you use, but it's an important piece of the decarbonization puzzle. So the Carbon Leadership Forum, which is the nonprofit that started in Seattle out of the College for Built Environments at the University of Washington in 2010, is really the go-to resource on embodied carbon and provides a variety of toolkits and forums and different resources to those across the policy space, across the AEC space, and beyond. I'll point here. You see a bunch of blue font with a line, right? That's all active links. So when we send this out as a PDF after, all those are active links that'll take you, for example, my internet was being a little slow on me, but this will take you to the Carbon Leadership Forum main page. So you could probably get to these in a lot of different ways, but we've tried to embed this with as many resources as possible to make it really a functional tool at the back end of the presentation. So Carbon Leadership Forum Wisconsin Hub started October last year. We're one of many. Patrick, who's joining us, has been a part of the Minneapolis Twin Cities hub for a little while. So again, there's a variety of other conversations happening on more of a regional scale as those hubs continue to be developed. So we are your CLF hub in Wisconsin. Kim and Julia have been on board since the beginning, and we'd like to welcome Chelsea today as a new member of our co-lead team. Chelsea, please, as I requested, forced introduction, please.
Of course. Thanks, Ben. Happy to be here with the Carbon Leadership Forum group. I work at Whole Tree Structures. We're within the mass timber industry, really trying to dive even deeper into carbon sequestration in the built world. So glad to be on this team.
So Chelsea reached out after one of our events and said she wanted to get involved. So again, we're always looking for more power with people in numbers and expertise that's in the virtual room today. So again, it's a raise your hand and let us know if you're interested in getting involved, and we can find a way that fits capacity and whatever else you're willing to give. We'll get to this at the end. LinkedIn, for better or worse, is our main mode of communication at the moment. Sounds like that works well for some people and not well for others. So we may ask you on that at the end, but do loop into the LinkedIn page. Julia Pooler, one of our co-leads, has done an amazing job of getting our website up. We'll continue to build that out. I think since the last time we met, we do have an active YouTube channel. So trying to build out that. Again, this recording will go there. I think our first video is up to like 14 views, and I probably have 12 of them, but it's all good. It's there for when we need it in the future. So as a hub, we're trying to do a variety of different things: recruit, educate, empower, action, and network. This is kind of part of the core education programming we're trying to deliver. There's obviously a big emphasis on embodied carbon calculation and tools. We're calling it for the AEC professionals. It's probably broaden that out a bit, but that's the focus of today. So wanted to, I think, give people two access points into this content. One being, if you're just getting started, there's a lot of kind of do-it-yourself tutorials and things you can dive in on your own. And if you're already using these tools and looking to have more detailed conversations, I think as a spinoff, we're trying to figure out how we could have maybe more informal conversations about people who are really practitioners and challenges and improvements maybe that we could do via idea sharing. So I'm going to lean on, I see Kim Radine pretty heavily in some of this. I know, truthfully, I've used some of these tools. I have not used all these tools. So I went on a little learning journey of my own, pulling a good chunk of this together. Definitions, if you aren't familiar with them, are an important piece of the sustainability conversation, and definitely the embodied carbon. So global warming potential, right, is used as kind of our index for quantifying the magnitude of impact, and kilograms of CO2 being the metric that we're using to kind of standardize that. A lot of talk today about life cycle analysis or life cycle assessment, and the whole building life cycle assessment being the aim of a lot of the number of the tools that you're going to hear a little more about. And then EPDs, again, being kind of a verified third-party document that really give us a more accurate picture rather than, product-wide other documents that are kind of based on assumptions. So Kim recommended I throw this in, and it is a very important piece of thinking, right? We're thinking about the broader product and building life cycle. So these different modules or different stages of materials and of our building stock is important to think about. So, right, is a product quantifying embodied carbon impact just for this initial product stage when things are extracted and sent out the gate of a manufacturing facility, for example? Are they also including construction A4 and A5? I think Monica will probably get into that a little bit later with EC3. But really, these tools are meant to capture the entire life cycle of our buildings. A few things I'm going to point out, Kim, and I'll probably ask you to help me with the third point a bit. One resource that I ran into a little while ago, and again, Findorf's a contractor, so this is just kind of where my mind defaults to is, we have all these design and construction milestones in a typical project. This is irrespective of whether sustainability is a focus or not. And the Carbon Leadership Forum produced this tool, I think, back in 2019, just thinking of this whole building analysis and then also kind of a material component analysis. And when we go back and think about, 50% design development or, early SDs, there's going to be different tools that do different things for you at those various stages, right? Like a high level tool is not necessarily going to be as impactful if you're at construction documents and if you were doing it with kind of a conceptual model. So I haven't fully unpacked this tool. I don't know if anyone's using it, so I'd be curious to know if anyone is. But again, this is linked in, and I think a nice way to think about the various opportunities related to embodied carbon calculation within a typical design and construction process. Kim, do you have anything to add there?
We have taken that process, the roadmap, and we're in the process of converting it to fit more closely how we normally design. So, I mean, it was a really good template for what we do. And yeah, we're in the process of, as you said, figuring out which tools work where, and then plugging them in and having a little more user-friendly document that any designer can pick up. So I think that's going to be useful for us.
I think we're kind of in the same boat. When I first looked at this, I thought, well, that is like the ideal state, and we very rarely manage to achieve the ideal state. So how do we find the tools that we can use on the time frame that we have? And so, yeah, we've been kind of trying to massage this process and also create some of our own tools like structural base studies. Can we just have a base study that we go to and we know the embodied carbon associated with that base study instead of trying to do a full-on structural model in early design when we might not have time. So I think you're right though, Ben. I think this is a great starting point for folks to look at.
Yeah, and every project delivery is a little different. Like you did 10 projects, if you did one project twice, it wouldn't go the same way, right? There's too many external factors, but throw into that different delivery methods and you really do need to make it kind of specific to your context in terms of process and what works. And I can say from my perspective, that's definitely where we're at. How do we operationalize this with our typical delivery method? So this discussion is about tools. So we want to shift the conversation. I'm going to hopefully talk less for the rest of the time. We have Kim, Monica, and Patrick who have graciously offered to talk about a few tools in a little more detail, but Carbon Leadership Forum has this tool, if I can get it to open. So tools for measuring embodied carbon. This was really kind of the backdrop of what we used as our foundation for what to talk about today. So they have a variety of design integrated tools, calculators, that product selection. So this gets a little bit to how they're used and when they're used. Based on what we're collectively seeing maybe most prevalently, we've prioritized certain ones over others, but this is here. I will note, I didn't realize this till later. The first where the tool is named is actually an active link. We also put all the active links in the deck. So you can always come back here, click on these and learn a little bit more about it. And this, Kim, when we met to plan this, I think really drove this point home is it's the use case for each of these tools is different. So I think part of it is just getting your feet wet, understanding what they do and figuring out based on what you're trying to do for the project you're on, what fits the use case best. So today we're going to cover Athena and TallyCat, which is actually not on this list. In a little more detail, but then actually jump into demos for the EC3 tool, for Tally, and for one-click LCA. Kim, I know in our conversations you've used some other tools. I think the CARE tool is one to point out for existing building versus new building. That analysis from an embodied carbon standpoint is one. It seems to be getting some traction, at least in my headspace. Anything else you want to point out to the group in terms of these other tools?
Some of them are just really high level, like Build Carbon Neutral, I would say is super high level. It asks you some general questions, and what you get out of it is not really tailored to the materiality of your project, but it's just a high level understanding. And then like it goes from there into deep dives, and some of them focus on specific materials or structure. So there's really just a wide variety of tools out there right now. And again, it kind of comes back to your process and what challenge you're trying to approach will really drive which tool makes the most sense for you and the timeline you have to deal with that challenge. So I think that's why so many tools have been developed, is there's just a lot of challenges to try to deal with, and everyone's kind of come at it from a slightly different angle, and we've ended up with a lot of different tools out there.
Yeah, we talked about in the planning, to try to roadmap each of these on that design and construction timeline for when, kind of as an assumption for optimal use. That might be an interesting tool to build out. We don't have that today, but if it's something that there's interest for this group, we can try to track it down or put something together. Anyone else? I'd feel free to open it up if anyone else has any other comments on any of these tools that they're using before we jump into a overview of 5 of them.
I've never used Kaleidoscope for a project, but it's a tool I've played around with a lot. That's pretty awesome. I don't know if anybody has been able to use that one, but I would be interested to see. It's a good tool that shows potential for how you go about your design. So that's a really cool tool that I like.
Yeah, we really like it too. I like to point our designers at it as they're looking at exterior wall systems, because it's nice and quick and an easy way to kind of start to understand different wall systems and other components too.
Who owns it?
It's by Payet.
Okay, right there.
And I would second, it's also a good tool, I think, for owners too, because it's a very visually appealing and easy to understand. So I know the one time an architect has shown it has been with the owner, and they really appreciated the examples and how it worked.
We've had that same experience. As Kimberly mentioned, it's really easy to use and early, high level, and we've pointed our designers toward it to say, use this to present to your clients, and had some success with that.
This is not a paid advertisement for Kaleidoscope. I had to say it. Check it out. It sounds like a good tool that I have not used, but I will be looking into it after this discussion. So Athena is one that, stepping back. So the 5 tools I mentioned, Athena, Tally, one-click, TallyCat, and Tally. We're going to have a similar overview and then a resources and link slide, and then we're going to do demos for 3 of them. So we tried to standardize, kind of like, let's put these topics together and run through them. So Athena is not one we're going to cover in detail. I've used Athena pretty minimally. I know a lot of you probably have, because one reason it's been in the market for a couple decades, 2002 it was launched. It is a free tool that looks at whole building life cycle analysis or those whole assemblies. Again, from what I gather, the funding of the tool itself is the tool is updated as funding is available. So again, my understanding is that the data set just isn't as current as some of the other whole building lifecycle assessment tools in the industry. So just take that with a grain of salt. It is also a standalone software. So some of the integration you see with other tools isn't out there, but it's free and available. So user manual. We also, there's a lot of really great things happening in other hubs across the country. The Wisconsin hub specifically, we were just on our first regional call with a lot of the others. It's the central region, so it's like Wisconsin to Texas, kind of an interesting way to carve out the US, but hearing what other hubs have done, and I think that idea sharing and borrowing what other people are doing, especially when they're not regional specific, is something we're going to continue to try to do. So always be on the lookout. I know when we post things to LinkedIn, sometimes it's not always Wisconsin hub, so just be aware of that. And now over to OneClick. I'm going to let Kim, do you want to just talk through the overview?
Sure.
Okay.
So Plaid started, we tested a few tools and we started using OneClick for most of our whole building lifecycle assessments about, I want to say 2 years ago. We got to OneClick because we are a SE 2050 signatory, in addition to needing to do lifecycle assessment for LEED, and also AIA 2030 has an embodied carbon component. And when we looked at things from an architectural standpoint, some tools worked really well for us, but they didn't work well for our structural team. And when we tested OneClick, it seemed to really fit the bill. It's, Ben's got the information here, but it's a European tool, so there are some interesting things that happen occasionally. Don't accidentally put a comma in your number, because it'll read it as a period and you'll have a heart attack when your carbon intensity is way, way too high. It has several calculation tools. One of the ones that I use most of the time is the LCA for LEED. It's got a design and construction focus. They have a huge database of EPDs. And one of the things I like about the way that they arrange their EPD database is they will keep all of the EPDs, but they will warn you if there are things in the EPD that you should be aware of, like irregular data points, or the EPD is expired. They don't get rid of it. They tell you it's expired, but you can still see it, which has proven helpful before. It also it integrates with Revit, although I don't like the way it integrates with Revit, so I don't actually use that. You can import data from Excel, which I've done. There's a couple of other different things you can do with it, and I think they're hopefully continuing to work on that stuff. And then, am I talking too slow, Ben? Move me along. Yeah, so then there's a lot of different ways to do data entry. So then I think on the next slide, Ben's just got some of the resources and tutorials, which there are some really good ones out there. And OneClick, the OneClick folks, obviously they've got a tool they're trying to sell you. So if you ever want them to give you a overview, they're usually pretty happy to do that. But I can just hopefully kind of quickly show you
Kim,
a little bit.
Can I make one
Yeah,
quick point before we move on?
go for it.
So this OneClick LCA bootcamp, again, this is something I ran into last time they did it, maybe a month ago. So this is a live, during 1 week, you essentially have a 2-hour training session every morning. So they'll run you through these modules. It's free of charge. And then they, I think, grant you access on like the Thursday and Friday sessions to get into the tool for free.
Try it.
To try it. So it's a really nice, if you're able to afford 2 hours for a week, and it unfortunately would have to be this, but it seems like they do it relatively frequently. Check this out and do it. It's again, low cost of entry other than your time. So would strongly recommend checking out that boot camp and getting signed up if OneClick's a tool you think you want to utilize.
Then I think it does happen monthly, because there's one happening this week and then again the week of June 12th. So keep an eye out for that.
Sounds like a focus of the business plan to get people on board to start paying for the license. So that's great to hear.
So should I see if I could make it work now, Ben? Fingers crossed.
Try to share, otherwise I will stop sharing.
Yeah. Did it work?
Yes, I can see it.
All right. So how much time do I have for this, Ben? Can you remind me?
As much time as you need.
All right, just hit the
7
taboo
minutes.
buzzer. Give me a
7 minutes, you're good.
when it's time to
I'll
stop.
advance, yeah, you're good.
So I just put an example project together just to kind of show everyone how one-click generally works. To get a project started, you input some basic information about it. You need to know the floor area. If you haven't worked in embodied carbon a lot and you're not used to metric, you will probably need to get used to metric because it comes up a lot. And a lot of EPDs are in metric units, but so you input your general project information, you tell it which tool you want to use. So I set this up with LCA for lead, and then you can start putting in your designs. So I have a CLF example project here, and if I click into that, I can go into my building materials. And again, there's many different ways to get your building materials in here. Our structural group does have some good success taking their models from Revit into OneClick, but they have sort of a different model setup. And for me, architecturally, I just have not trusted what I've gotten from that method. So what I tend to do is I either use their Excel sheet and I create my own schedules in Revit, or sometimes I even just create my own schedules in Revit to get my materials and I manually enter, which I'm sure is probably about the slowest way you can do it, but I'm picky about some stuff. It requires kind of a big screen. I'm going to zoom out a little bit so you can see the whole column area for the different materials. But what you can do is you can start to type in like the type of material that you want. So if I do 4,000 PSI, it pulls up all these different EPDs that it thinks match what you've typed in. And then you can select what you want. We have some favorite materials at FLAD that we use, kind of over and over again. So they come to the top. So then you can select your EPD and you can plug in the quantity that you have. So I'm just going to plug in a random number. I like to keep comments on all of my materials so that I know where they came from, because you inevitably start wondering, well, what is this associated with? And what I've found is the better you're tracking your data, the less you struggle to know exactly what the material is. So you can add your comments. Omni-class is important because when you start trying to figure out where is the carbon, if you haven't classified things in a clear way, it gets challenging to kind of break that down. But anyway, you can plug in everything that you want. And then this little question mark here will show you your EPD. You can download the EPD. You can look at the different data points, and it'll give you the environmental profile of the EPD. If you want to compare the product that you've just pulled up to other similar products, I'm not sure that it's pulling this window up so you can see it, so I'm gonna skip that. But it does have a function where you can actually look at other products that OneClick thinks are comparable to the product that you have and see how it ranks. So if I pull up my rebar, I can compare different rebar manufacturers and see which ones kind of come out on top. So you can enter all of your information that way. You always need to have your building area and your calculation period defined. So it's pretty straightforward. And then once you have all of your quantities in, then you can go and take a look at your results, and one of the things that we like to look at is the results per denominator. So it's carbon intensity, essentially, if we're looking at global warming. And that is really helpful to us because we can kind of start to understand based on the other projects in our portfolio if things are looking right, or if maybe something in the model is skewed. If the carbon intensity is like drastically different than a comparable building, then we start wondering, you know, is the material right? And that is, QCing is really important. We've found with LCA, because it is pretty easy to have a decimal point in the wrong place, or something, you know, comes in incorrectly. So you kind of have to check it, which OneClick also has this completeness and plausibility checker. Right now, this has an F because all I've entered are some structural like foundation materials. So it's saying, hey, you've got all these things that are normally in a building and you don't have any of them. So this isn't right. So this LCA checker is kind of a nice way to see if anything feels off. I also like looking at most contributing materials, where it breaks down A1 through A3, which materials have the most embodied carbon associated with A1 through A3. And you can kind of see where your biggest challenge areas are. And then it also has all of these graphs that OneClick puts together, but you can also always go in and download the Excel files or a CSV file and create your own graphs from that data. And then when you, like for LEED, for example, if you have a baseline project and then you want to create a proposed project, and if your baseline is going to be generally the same, you know, structure and everything as your proposed, but you're going to try to swap out some different concrete mixes, you can just take a project and copy it, and then start playing with the different materials in the copied version of the project and compare the two. So that's kind of really high level, the way the tools work, and then you can start to see, you know, how the two projects are different. For example, if I were to go into this one and change my concrete, so I think this is the Lycon mix. If I were to go in 4,000 PSI again, and I do, I'm just gonna pull up something random here. This guy, this is a National Ready Mix EPD. Now when I go back into my results, you can see when I replace that mix, let's go to global warming. Oh, I have to compare my designs. Wait for it. Back out. Now I can see that by replacing that mix in my copied project, my global warming potential went way, way up. So my project that I started with has almost a 50% reduction. So that's sort of the way that we, you know, start to look at things and kind of compare the impacts of different material selections. Or if you have two totally different building designs and you're comparing design scheme 1 versus design scheme 2, you can kind of see the differences between the two. So I think that's probably a good stopping point, unless anyone has any questions.
And I think what we can probably do is just run through the demos, and then we'll end the recording and then come back to conversation and questions at the end, if that works for everybody.
Okay.
Thanks, Kim. That was great. Appreciate
Yeah.
Live demos are leap of faith, everybody. So I'm very appreciative to the three of you. So moving on to Tally, I'm going to ask for some help from Patrick. The similar overview and resources slide is here. Again, Tally's got tons of resources, webinars, tutorials on their website, so check that out. You know, Tally's a Revit plugin that looks at the whole building. It is not free, although relatively modest subscription amount there. And a tool that was created in 2013 and then handed over to Building Transparency just in 2021. So Building Transparency now operates the tool. I think I'll leave it there, Patrick, and let you share your screen if you're ready for it.
All right.
And maybe a little introduction as well, Patrick, sorry.
I'm Patrick Smith. I work for Hamel Green Abramson in Minneapolis. So we have 10 offices nationwide, two offices in Wisconsin now. So look us up and invite our engineers and architects to join your hub. Can everyone see my screen now?
Yep.
So this is, I'm not going to quite go into the amount of how-to that Kimberly was, because the website for, I think it's Ask Tally, has numerous webinars that are, and it's frankly really easy to use, and you can certainly get more and better information from them than you would get here. 20 minutes into the first how-to webinar, and you'll be able to use this tool. What I wanted to talk about is our evolution of using it. I started using it probably about 4 or 5 years ago. There weren't a lot of clients asking for LCA, so we really didn't become expert in any way at it. But one of the things that we immediately ran into was Tally's ability to QC a model. I'm structural technician, and if you have any bad habits at all, for example, copying a beam, a W beam over and changing it to an HSS beam, the material properties are hosted in the instance parameters. So you'll have a W beam or an HSS beam with the wrong materials associated to it. So what Tally can do is, if you open up a 3D model or the 3D view, you can start a building study. And here I'm going to pause again. You can do a full building study. So if you're just going to do an actual life cycle analysis, you can do the design comparisons, and that was the base studies that were mentioned earlier. There's utilizing Revit's ability to do design options. You can compare different systems. And then you can also do a template file, which we are planning on using a bit more as we go. When we have starter projects, our BIM department has starter projects for all of our different disciplines. You can go into those files beforehand and do the fixing sort of stuff that I'm going to be talking about in a second. So, and that has the capacity to get you down the road a little bit more with each project before you start designing. So then quickly, in a full building study, you can make the choices for all of these. Again, I'm structural, so I'm just going to do walls and floors, since we use floors for our structural, both for roofs and for floors. And then you just have to go through your work sets. This is an existing project with a lot of remodeling going on. And eventually, as you click enough buttons, you'll see this apply will come online. And I've been through this model once or twice already, so hopefully it'll come up pretty quick. If this was the first time, along with the yellow and green, I'd also be seeing a lot of red. And then the red is that, it's completely undone. The material is not mapped at all. The yellow means it's partially mapped. So you can see I've got, obviously, since I've done this last time, we've added an 18-inch column. And it's really quick. You can drop this down again, and you'll be asked to edit the definition. I'm not watching very closely, so okay. Concrete. So you work through this, cast in place. You get a number of choices in here. Kimberly talked a little bit about national averages. Tally will always default to a national average, which is useful in the beginning of a project, because if you just go down and automatically choose all of the defaults and the national averages, what you'll end up with is a model that can act as a really good baseline. So if you have to report, for example, to SE 2050, you'll have that baseline, and then you can easily follow it as you progress forward in design to see how much you've you've reduced your embodied carbon. It's not as nimble or as iterative as one-click is. So we have gone to using one-click more for that. So I'm just going to cancel this, and it goes through and you get a bunch of other choices, but as I said, most of them are for the national averages at this point. See if I can pull up a piece of steel. Here's some framing. So the one thing that happens, my example of copying a W-beam over to an HSS, is that instead of seeing ASTM A992 here, you'd see a different material. The way to fix that is to isolate in Revit view. This is why you have to have the 3D view open. And then that's your normal isolation process. You know, sometimes there'll be hundreds of them if you've been going through it. And then you can just quickly go into your materials palette, choose the correct one. This already is the correct one, so I'm not going to make a choice. And you can do this for every object in your model, which gives you a really clean model. So we do it at the beginning of a model. You could also do it if you have a client who is asking for the model as a deliverable to make sure that you have a really clean model to give. And then the next phase that we're just starting to do, I have a project right now that's going to compare 6 finished projects that we have against the bill of materials from the contractor. So this will give us an idea of how thorough our modeling is, whether or not we can, you know, use our model and quickly and efficiently and in a way that is trustworthy, give a material list to the client. The long-term promise of BIM and LCA is that we will be able to build a database of materials for almost any project you can think of that will give the client the ability to say, I have this much embodied carbon in this project. If it's a wood project, it goes wood or steel or whatever, it goes some way towards proving the idea of using buildings as a bank, if you will, for materials for future uses. This goes towards circularity and design for deconstruction, but it gives you a good set of data that you can present to clients, that clients can then present to bankers. Potentially, it can get you into the embodied carbon credit market. If you, for example, are a real estate company with hundreds, if not thousands of buildings across the nation, you could have a reliable database that says, our company has this much embodied carbon that we have removed from, you know, from the atmosphere and from our business efforts. So you can see it has that potential. I'm not sure where that's going to go, but that's one of the reasons that we're doing this. And Tally has that capability without being forced into a full life cycle analysis. I think some of the other products that have been talked about and will be talked about are probably a little better. The next thing I wanted to mention was that TallyCat is going to be an offshoot from Tally. It is free, or will be free within a couple of years, at least the last time I talked to the developers. So you'll be able to, if you're a smaller company, you'll be able to get into this market quickly without having to spend any money.
It just pulled up. I hope that share worked. Maybe that TallyCat reference was we weren't planning to do any demo on since it's in beta, but wanted to again provide these links and some early training opportunities and resources, which, as Patrick mentioned, seems like a pretty powerful tool to pull quantities out of Revit and really be a communication tool between Tally and EC3, correct? Sounds like there was some GWP savings heat maps I was watching in this in this quick training that they provided. So I'm definitely interested in getting more involved in TallyCat, and when we get into the conversation, if anyone's using it, be definitely curious to hear more.
And we have people testing it, but we haven't used it yet. Have I unshared yet?
I stole it from you.
Oh, perfect.
Sorry
Good.
about that.
No, that's all right, because this is not my forte.
All good. Thank you so much, Patrick. Appreciate the expertise and sharing about Tally. So, Monica, we want to hand it over to you and EC3. Again, I think of EC3 as the tool for contractors, right? But it plays a piece into how all these whole building tools are used early, then communicate with kind of procurement or more construction focused tools later on. So, Monica, I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, thank you. So first, hi, I'm Monica Wentz. I'm a sustainability engineer for Turner Construction. Prior to joining full-time as a sustainability engineer, I was an estimator for about 2 years, and then before that, for about 5 years, I was a superintendent / APM in the field. So embodied carbon in construction calculator, or EC3 as it's commonly known, is a carbon calculation tool by Building Transparency. It was launched about 4 years ago as a free public tool. There are some beta pilot projects that do have some options to add, but there are some paid additional options. Is primarily used, as Ben mentioned, during the construction phase, probably mostly with contractors, but it could be it could be anybody during the construction phase. And from my experience, it's probably the most commonly used carbon calculator. There are a few integration methods. You have some listed here, Revit, CostX, and there's a couple others. I know Procore is one they're working on, same with actually CostX. So really all the integrations are ones that they're currently working on. Go to the next slide. So these are just some of the resources and tools. I had actually used, I think, the tutorials, videos that Building Transparency used. It looks like they've actually, they update these quite frequently. So there's new ones and changed ones every so often. But I know I used these when I first did my first EC3 model like 2.5 years ago. Before I jump into a project and go through a short demo, I thought I would start, go to the next slide, just about like what is the data going into this. So what makes it a little bit different is, or similar, is it's using quantity takeoffs and then the EPDs to create the embodied carbon calculation. It's specifically looking for quantity takeoffs, and these are the values that are from estimating. So the whole idea and the hope is that there will be a seamless transition from creating an estimate, cost estimate, and then being able to transition that and produce a embodied carbon estimate. So really the hope is, with the integrations that are currently being developed, is you can almost put your data right into a cost estimating software. CostX is one of the ones that I've used, and then be able to click a couple of buttons, make a couple of edits, and be able to produce a embodied carbon calculation also. So with that, I will, and then I did include some just best practice items. These are ones that we share. Just there's a number of different views. Make sure you use folders, subfolders. But as you're working through them, these are just some notes. So I'm going to try.
I'll stop.
Okay.
We got you.
Cool. Okay. So just due to time, I thought I would just show an existing copy of an existing project, and then pull up a quick demo. So this is a project, I should have prefaced, I'm originally from the East Coast. All of the projects I've ever worked on are out of Pennsylvania. So so this is a project that we did a baseline study on for the DD phase, going on and completing this about a year ago now. So a couple of the key items for this project is to make sure you have the project address, fill in as much information as you can. These we use to just sort and be able to appreciate what the product is. But then probably the big item here is making sure you appreciate and understand your floor area. So as estimators, making sure that you are in agreement with your architect on what's the gross floor, and so going through that. And then the last part is just taking that information, and actually, since I have taking whatever your cost estimate looks like, this is one that was slimmed down so that we could easily put it into EC3, but going through and just pulling out your data that's applicable. What information are you going to include? CostX has a nice item here just to remind you what really should you be including. For our baseline estimates, we include structure and foundations. So typically that'll be our concrete and our steel. So this is just one example. So I have the substructure. All of this is already pre-filled in once I jump into the test one that I have. And you can see, start to put in your, what is the product, very similar to what you would see on your estimate, and then your quantity, your units, and then your EPDs. So since this is already filled out one, you can see you fill in your compressive strength and it'll actually give you, this is probably one of the coolest parts, I think, to EC3 is this diagram over here. So it'll show you like where are you at comparatively to both the overall what's in EC3 and then also the range here. So if I pull up another example, down to structure. Guess this one doesn't have it. If I click here, another thing that Kimberly had noted was that one click will know if something has been changed. You will also see that in EC3. Let's see if I can find a good one, but it'll say if the EPD is no longer current. But again, this is a great tool to use as you're trying to appreciate where is this product. And you can also see, like, is it a conservative estimate or an achievable estimate? Okay, let's kind of quickly just showing an example. If I jump in to actually inputting an estimate, again, very similar. The idea is you can pull your data from an estimate into EC3. So for this one, I just filled out a couple of pieces of information. I added in some more information here. I know Ben had mentioned the A5 and A4. So EC3 is supposed to cover A1 through A5. A1 through A3 is where what they started with. My understanding is A4 and A5 is still included as 0, but with the growth of this happening in the next couple months, years. Okay, so if I was to include some information, I would go in For this one, this is, oh, actually, so I'm going to make a multi-tiered item underneath this. So I have a grade beam. I'm going to have both steel and concrete. So go in and actually delete this for a second. Okay, so to add anything for EC3, you can add a new element. If you want to make it a multi-material, so as I mentioned, it could have concrete and steel into one material, because as we know, when we're building something, it might be a column, but column might have concrete, column might have concrete and steel, might have just steel. So it's just understanding and appreciating, similar to how we do estimates, how we're going to calculate that. So I'm going to name this my GB01 3x3 grade beam. Oh, sorry. Grade beam. And for this example, I just have one material, one piece of it. I could click down and indicate what type this is. I can't remember. So it doesn't look like I have an example, so I'm just going to make this a free form. They do have examples. If I click for curtain wall, it'll pop up with this example. I think I have only used this for slab on metal deck before, so it was helpful. So I didn't have to do my full calculation. It was an early estimate of a conceptual estimate, so I just had like square foot of deck, but I was able to plug that in and get all the additional information below. I'm going to add this in. I'm just going to call this concrete, my 45 PSI. So I have 38 yards. For that one piece, and now I'm going to look up the EPD. So you can either click through, click concrete, and go to whatever your concrete material is. This one I know is ready mix. The other options is you can always just search, click ready mix, hit next. And then this is where you're going to plug in, and kind of the really cool part of EC3. So for this one, I have 45,000 PSI. I know that it's going to be a 28-day. I'm not going to do the secondary item over here. I'm just going to keep it as one straight PSI. I'm going to select no for lightweight. Good. And now under geography, I'm going to type in what? Pennsylvania, you can also do, and just keep this global, and then also do 20 miles from the project site. So I'm just going to do 20 miles there. And I'm going to search. There are a couple different, there's some more categories here that I probably should have clicked, because this is going to give me, oh, no EPDs. Okay. I go back to, maybe because I clicked this. Okay. See if that works. Oh, I am not sure what I'm clicking wrong today, but typically it'll list out all the EPDs in the area. And then I will select which one. Let me see if I can just do a different PSI. 50. Okay, there we go. So I have a couple different ready mix. I can either use this information here and click one of the examples, or you can also use industry EPDs. So depending on what you know for the project level, if you're really early on and you don't know maybe what the specific spec's going to be, or what your specific ready mix design is going to be, you can either use your industry EPDs or a product EPD, or I'm just going to say use the collection, and it's going to give me an average. So if I go back to the search, and so I can either use the conservative or achievable. This I know I'm running out of time. So you can also indicate if you're, it'll start indicating what the intensity is. Okay, so that was maybe a quick, just one example. I'd say concrete and steel are what I've used the most. There are some examples of using interiors. So I did have someone give me an interior product where we did use some of our interior fit outs, building out ceilings, paint, carpet, tile, and interior glazing. So this is one example. But for the most part, I would say, Ben is another contractor, I'd say I'm mostly seeing this used for the big five that LEED is asking for.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yep.
Thanks so much, Monica. These are, as you can tell, detailed tools. We are at time, so I think we will say a quick wrap up and goodbye. Thank you to Kim, to Monica, to Patrick for presenting and doing the walkthrough. Really appreciate it. I guess when I think about the tools, right, Athena is a free one click. You can do the boot camp and get free access to the tool to test it out. Tally, right, there's a free 10-day trial, I believe there. EC3 is free. So like, get in and use these tools and start messing around. There's plenty of people in the same boat who would love, I think, to idea share and try to figure them out, as we're all kind of on our different journey in this space. So try to get in and see what you can learn no matter where you are in that journey. We are going to send out this deck, again, that has all the links. Feel free to pass that along to others, who are interested in the content. Again, we're trying to get more people involved in this conversation and more people using the tools so we can have, again, pretty detailed conversations with practitioners and people who are trying to make an impact like you all in this space. So thank you for joining. I will stop the recording. If anyone wants to stay on, you are more than welcome to, but I know we're over time. So we will follow up with a few audience polls that we didn't quite get to. Thank you for coming.